Three Desert Vipers riders roared into a Texas BBQ joint looking for protection money. They found a Navy SEAL instead. What happened next would uncover a multi-billion-dollar human trafficking ring, dismantle an international crime syndicate, and teach the Desert Vipers motorcycle gang that sometimes the most lethal operator in the room is the quiet woman eating brisket in the corner booth. They thought they were shaking down another small-town business. Instead, they picked a fight with one of the deadliest combat veterans in U.S. military history. This is the story of how a few rowdy bikers messed with the wrong female Navy SEAL, and how their biggest mistake became their final one. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Smoke's BBQ and grill, as Commander Rebecca Mitchell cut into her perfectly smoked brisket, savoring the flavors that had made this off-the-highway joint famous among truckers and locals alike. She'd chosen this small town outside San Antonio precisely because nothing ever happened here. After 16 years of high-stakes operations and missions that would never see the light of day, all she wanted was peace and good BBQ. Marcus, Smoke. Thompson approached her table, wiping his hands on his sauce-stained apron. The legendary pitmaster's weathered face broke into a warm smile that reminded Reb of her father. "How's that brisket treating you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice carrying the gentle drawl of a man who'd spent his life in these parts. "Best in Texas, Smoke," Reb replied, unconsciously adjusting her sleeve to cover the sealed trident tattoo on her forearm. The old pitmaster had no idea about the nightmares that still jolted her awake, or why she always chose the corner booth with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. The peaceful afternoon shattered as three choppers thundered into the gravel parking lot, their engines deliberately revving loud enough to rattle the restaurant's windows. The other diners tensed, conversations dying mid-sentence. Smoke's smile faded as he gripped his towel tighter. The Desert Vipers had arrived. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Smoke's BBQ and grill as Commander Rebecca Mitchell cut into her perfectly smoked brisket, savoring the flavors that had made this off-the-highway joint famous among truckers and locals alike. She'd chosen this small town outside San Antonio precisely because nothing ever happened here. After 16 years of high-stakes operations and missions that would never see the light of day, all she wanted was peace and good BBQ. Marcus Smoke Thompson approached her table, wiping his hands on his sauce-stained apron. The legendary pitmaster's weathered face broke into a warm smile that reminded Reb of her father. "How's that brisket treating you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice carrying the gentle drawl of a man who'd spent his life in these parts. "Best in Texas, Smoke," Reb replied, unconsciously adjusting her sleeve to cover the sealed trident tattoo on her forearm. The old pitmaster had no idea about the nightmares that still jolted her awake, or why she always chose the corner booth with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. The peaceful afternoon shattered as three choppers thundered into the gravel parking lot, their engines deliberately revving loud enough to rattle the restaurant's windows. The other diners tensed, conversations dying mid-sentence. Smoke's smile faded as he gripped his towel tighter. The Desert Vipers had arrived. Razor. Rick Thompson swaggered through the door, his leather cut displaying the Desert Viper's distinctive rattlesnake emblem. His two lieutenants, both massive men with hollow eyes, flanked him closely. Razor's face, scarred from what he claimed was a bar fight, but Reb recognized as shrapnel damage, twisted into what he probably thought was a charming smile as he surveyed the room. His gaze lingered on Reb for a moment too long before turning to Smoke. "Smoke, my old friend," Razor called out, his voice carrying an edge that made several patrons look away. "Missed you at the business owners meeting last night. Commissioner Rodriguez was asking about you." Smoke's hands trembled slightly as he folded his towel. "Had a special catering order, Razor. You know how it is with the business." Sure, Razor replied, moving closer to the counter. "But see, when the commissioner calls a meeting, attendance isn't really optional. He's trying to help local businesses thrive, and he needs everyone's support." His hand came down hard on the counter, making the silverware jump. Reb watched the exchange silently, her brisket forgotten. She cataloged details with practiced precision, the bulge under Razor's cut suggesting a poorly concealed 45, his right-hand man Cobra wearing steel-toed boots perfect for inflicting pain, and the third man they called Bull carrying brass knuckles in his back pocket. Maybe, Smoke said, his voice stronger than expected, the commissioner should focus on actually helping businesses instead of letting thugs collect protection money. The restaurant went dead silent. Razor's fake smile vanished. "What did you just say to me, old man?" he growled, reaching across the counter. Reb moved before conscious thought took over. 16 years of training kicked in as she grabbed Razor's wrist, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that made his fingers spasm. "He said," Reb spoke softly, but her voice carried throughout the silent restaurant, "that the commissioner should do his job." Razor tried to pull away, but Reb's grip was iron. Cobra and Bull moved to flank her, but she remained focused on Razor. "Let go of me," Razor snarled, "or my boys here will make you regret ever stepping foot in Texas." Reb smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Will they? Because from where I'm standing, you've got 3 choices. 1, you and your friends leave now and we forget this happened. 2, you try something stupid and I send all 3 of you to the emergency room. Or 3, she increased pressure slightly, making Razor wince, we find out just how many bones I can break before you hit the floor. You have no idea who you're messing with, lady, Razor spat. Actually, Reb replied, I do. Richard Razor Thompson, dishonorable discharge from the Marines in 18. You and the Desert Vipers have been running protection rackets across 3 counties, but lately you've moved up to something bigger. The question is, what made a small-time thug suddenly start playing with the big boys? The color drained from Razor's face. Bull's hand moved toward his brass knuckles, but Reb's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't. Your form's sloppy, and you telegraph your moves like an amateur. By the time you reach those knuckles, this situation will be very different. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Razor raised his free hand in surrender. All right, we're leaving. But this isn't over. Reb released him, stepping back to give them space to exit. It can be. That's up to you. The 3 bikers backed away, their attempts to look menacing undermined by the way Razor rubbed his wrist. As they mounted their bikes, Razor shot one last glare through the window. Who are you? Smoke whispered as the motorcycles roared away. Reb sat back down, taking a bite of her now cold brisket. Just someone who's seen enough bullies for one lifetime. But as she watched the Desert Vipers disappear down the highway, Reb knew Razor was right about one thing. This wasn't over. She'd just painted a target on her back, and if her instincts were correct, the protection racket was just the tip of the iceberg. The Desert Vipers were part of something much bigger, something that reached far beyond this small Texas town. Smoke placed a fresh plate of brisket in front of Reb, along with his signature spicy BBQ sauce. Whatever happens next, he said firmly, you're not alone here. His tone carried more weight than simple gratitude. Reb nodded, already running through scenarios in her mind. She'd chosen this town looking for peace, but sometimes peace had to be fought for. If it was a fight the Desert Vipers wanted, they were about to learn why Navy SEALs were the last people you wanted as enemies. Later that evening, Reb sat in her small ranch house on the outskirts of town, cleaning her Sig Sauer P226 with practiced precision. The encounter with the Desert Vipers played through her mind as she considered her next move. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It's open, Chief, she called out, not looking up from her work. Deputy Chief Maria Ramirez stepped inside, her weathered face betraying concern. Word travels fast in a small town. Heard you had a run-in with Razor and his boys at Smoke's place. News to me, Reb replied, reassembling her weapon with fluid movements. I just had a friendly chat with some customers who were being impolite. Maria sighed, settling into a chair across from her. Look, Commander Mitchell. Reb, she corrected. Reb, I know about your background. When you moved here 8 months ago, I ran a check. 16 years as a SEAL, multiple commendations, operations so classified even my law enforcement clearance couldn't access them. Reb finally looked up, meeting Maria's gaze. Then you know I can handle myself. That's what worries me. The Desert Vipers aren't just some local gang anymore. They've got connections, deep ones. Last month, my deputies found a warehouse full of encrypted servers and high-tech communication equipment. Before we could investigate, orders came down from the state level to back off. Sounds like someone's being paid to look the other way. Maria leaned forward, lowering her voice. Commissioner Rodriguez holds meetings at the Desert Vipers clubhouse. Half the county officials are driving cars they shouldn't be able to afford. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've got 2 teenage kids, Reb. I can't risk. So you turn a blind eye. Reb finished for her. I do what I can without getting my people killed. Maria stood, adjusting her gun belt. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Just be careful. Razor isn't the real power in the Desert Vipers. His boss, Gabriel Torres, is coming to town next week. The man's got connections to trafficking networks across 3 continents. Reb's expression remained neutral, but her mind was racing. Torres was a name she'd heard before during her last mission with the teams, an operation that had gone sideways, costing the lives of 2 of her closest friends. Thanks for the warning, Chief. As Maria reached the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Smoke Thompson's a good man. Been serving the best BBQ in Texas since I was a kid. What you did today, standing up for him, well, it's about time someone did. After Maria left, Reb pulled out her secure phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in months. Sullivan speaking. Kate, it's Mitchell. Remember that trafficking kingpin we tracked in Yemen? The one that got away? A pause. The one that got Peters and Rodriguez killed? Yeah. I think I found his operation. Texas, of all places. Christ, Reb, you're supposed to be retired. I need everything you can get me on Gabriel Torres and the Desert Vipers MC. Official channels only. I don't want to burn any of your backdoor sources. Kate sighed. Give me 48 hours, and Reb, be careful. Torres isn't someone you want to tangle with alone. Who said I'm alone? The next morning, Reb was helping Smoke prep the smokers when a group of motorcycles roared past. Not Desert Vipers this time. Their leather cuts displayed a different insignia. The Desert Dogs MC. Their leader, a massive man known as Grease, caught Reb's eye as they passed. There was recognition there and something else, a message. More trouble? Smoke asked, his voice tired. Maybe not, Reb replied. The Desert Dogs were different, former military mostly. They protected their territory but didn't prey on civilians, and if Reb's instincts were right, they might be potential allies. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Data coming through. Torres, definitely your guy. Body count makes Razor look like amateur hour. Got coordinates for server farms? Also, local intel suggests Desert Dogs MC might be enemy of your enemy. Reb smiled. Things were falling into place. The morning crowd started filtering in. Regulars who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation. They nodded to Reb with newfound respect. Word had spread. Someone had finally stood up to the Desert Vipers. Smoke placed a fresh plate of brisket in front of Reb, along with his signature spicy BBQ sauce. Whatever happens next, he said firmly, you're not alone here. His tone carried more weight than simple gratitude. Reb nodded, already running through scenarios in her mind. She'd chosen this town looking for peace, but sometimes peace had to be fought for. If it was a fight the Desert Vipers wanted, they were about to learn why Navy SEALs were the last people you wanted as enemies. Later that evening, Reb sat in her small ranch house on the outskirts of town, cleaning her Sig Sauer P226 with practiced precision. The encounter with the Desert Vipers played through her mind as she considered her next move. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It's open, Chief, she called out, not looking up from her work. Deputy Chief Maria Ramirez stepped inside, her weathered face betraying concern. Word travels fast in a small town. Heard you had a run-in with Razor and his boys at Smoke's place. News to me, Reb replied, reassembling her weapon with fluid movements. I just had a friendly chat with some customers who were being impolite. Maria sighed, settling into a chair across from her. Look, Commander Mitchell. Reb, she corrected. Reb, I know about your background. When you moved here 8 months ago, I ran a check. 16 years as a SEAL, multiple commendations, operations so classified even my law enforcement clearance couldn't access them. Reb finally looked up, meeting Maria's gaze. Then you know I can handle myself. That's what worries me. The Desert Vipers aren't just some local gang anymore. They've got connections, deep ones. Last month, my deputies found a warehouse full of encrypted servers and high-tech communication equipment. Before we could investigate, orders came down from the state level to back off. Sounds like someone's being paid to look the other way. Maria leaned forward, lowering her voice. Commissioner Rodriguez holds meetings at the Desert Vipers clubhouse. Half the county officials are driving cars they shouldn't be able to afford. I've got 2 teenage kids, Reb, I can't risk. So you turn a blind eye, Reb finished for her. I do what I can without getting my people killed. Maria stood, adjusting her gun belt. I'm not here to tell you what to do, just be careful. Razor isn't the real power in the Desert Vipers. His boss, Gabriel Torres, is coming to town next week. The man's got connections to trafficking networks across 3 continents. Reb's expression remained neutral, but her mind was racing. Torres was a name she'd heard before, during her last mission with the teams, an operation that had gone sideways, costing the lives of 2 of her closest friends. Thanks for the warning, Chief. As Maria reached the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Smoke Thompson's a good man. Been serving the best BBQ in Texas since I was a kid. What you did today, standing up for him, well, it's about time someone did. After Maria left, Reb pulled out her secure phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in months. Sullivan speaking. Kate, it's Mitchell. Remember that trafficking kingpin we tracked in Yemen, the one that got away? A pause. The one that got Peters and Rodriguez killed? Yeah, I think I found his operation. Texas of all places. Christ, Reb, you're supposed to be retired. I need everything you can get me on Gabriel Torres and the Desert Vipers MC. Official channels only. I don't want to burn any of your backdoor sources. Kate sighed. Give me 48 hours. And Reb, be careful. Torres isn't someone you want to tangle with alone. Who said I'm alone? The next morning, Reb was helping Smoke prep the smokers when a group of motorcycles roared past. Not Desert Vipers this time. Their leather cuts displayed a different insignia, the Desert Dogs MC. Their leader, a massive man known as Grease, caught Reb's eye as they passed. There was recognition there, and something else, a message. More trouble? Smoke asked, his voice tired. Maybe not, Reb replied. The Desert Dogs were different. Former military, mostly. They protected their territory but didn't prey on civilians. And if Reb's instincts were right, they might be potential allies. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Data coming through. Torres definitely your guy. Body count makes Razor look like amateur hour. Got coordinates for server farms. Also, local intel suggests Desert Dogs MC might be enemy of your enemy. Reb smiled. Things were falling into place. The morning crowd started filtering in, regulars who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation. They nodded to Reb with newfound respect. Word had spread. Someone had finally stood up to the Desert Vipers. Around noon, Carlos Rivera, the local mechanic, entered through the back door of the BBQ joint, making a beeline for Reb's usual spot. Got something you need to see? He said quietly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Security camera footage from my shop. Desert Vipers are moving something big. Heavy security. Professional drivers. Not their usual style. Reb reviewed the photos. Military-grade transport vehicles disguised as commercial trucks. armed escorts positioned with tactical precision. When? Last night. And here's the thing. They're getting sloppy, scared. Razor's got his people watching this place, watching you, but they're not being subtle about it. Carlos was right. 2 Desert Vipers prospects had been parked across the street all morning, trying too hard to look casual. Your boss know you're showing me this? Carlos smiled grimly. Maria's a good chief, but she's scared. Me? I've lived here my whole life. Smoke gave me my first job when I was 16, taught me about hard work and respect. I've got his back, same as you. Reb studied the young mechanic, seeing the steel in his spine, the determination in his eyes. Another potential ally. Be careful, she warned. If they realize you're helping me, I can handle myself, and I'm not the only one who's had enough. As if on cue, the rumble of motorcycles approached again. The desert dogs were back, this time pulling into Smoke's parking lot. Grease dismounted first, his massive frame filling the doorway as he entered. His weathered face and calculating eyes scanned the room before settling on Reb. Mind if we join you? Carlos tensed, but Reb nodded as Grease and 3 of his officers slid into the booth. Smoke appeared with coffee, seemingly unfazed by the new arrivals. Heard you had words with Razor, Grease said after Smoke left. Man's got a reputation for holding grudges. Is that why you're here? To warn me? Grease chuckled, the sound like gravel under tires. No, ma'am. We're here because the Desert Vipers are moving something through our territory without permission. High-tech equipment, the kind that gets people killed. And we thought you might be interested in a conversation about mutual interests. Reb leaned back, studying the bikers. Their posture, the way they carried themselves, definitely military backgrounds. And unlike the Desert Vipers, they looked her in the eye with respect, not challenge. I'm listening. Grease glanced at Carlos, who stood his ground. The mechanic stays, Reb said firmly. He's part of this. Fair enough. Grease leaned forward, lowering his voice. Torres is coming to oversee a major operation. Something big enough that Razor's got his people running scared. We've got intel, manpower, and motivation. What we need is someone who knows how to run an op like this. Someone with SEAL training. You hear a lot, Reb observed. Small community, military folks. Word gets around. Grease's voice softened slightly. I knew Peters. He was a good man. The mention of her fallen teammate hung in the air. After a moment, Reb spoke. If we do this, we do it my way. Clean, precise by the book, no cowboy stuff. Jag kan både bänta sidor. Vi härbar. Det debat är surda brang. The ready my way, see still way, Commander. As the desert dogs left, Carlos let out a breath he'd been holding. You sure about this? Reb watched the bikers mount up through the window. The 2 Desert Vipers prospects across the street were frantically making phone calls. No, she admitted. But sometimes you have to work with the devil you know to take down the one you don't. Night had fallen over the small Texas town when Reb's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Kate. She opened the file to find detailed satellite imagery of 3 locations just outside the town limits. Warehouses registered to shell companies, but clearly serving as Desert Vipers operations centers. A knock at the back door interrupted her analysis. Smoke stood there, looking nervous, but determined. You've got visitors, he whispered. In the smoke pit area. They say they're friends of yours. In the shadows behind the restaurant, Reb found Grease and his sergeant-at-arms, along with an unexpected figure. Deputy Chief Maria Ramirez. We've got a problem, Maria said without preamble. Torres isn't just coming for a routine inspection, he's moving his entire operation here permanently. Why? Reb asked, though she was already piecing it together. Grease spoke up. Small towns perfect, remote controlled local government, easy access to state lines. But that's not the real reason. He handed Reb a folder. Our contacts spotted these guys arriving at the private airstrip outside town. The surveillance photos showed familiar faces, members of the same trafficking network Reb had encountered in Yemen. the operation that had gone wrong. "They're consolidating," she muttered, "using the Desert Vipers as cover for a major distribution hub." "It gets worse," Maria added. "Commissioner Rodriguez called an emergency council meeting tonight. They're voting to slash the police budget by 60%. I'll have to lay off half my deputies." "They're clearing the board," Reb concluded, "making sure there's no official resistance." Grease nodded grimly. "Torres arrives in 3 days. Razor's boys are already setting up additional security. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Reb studied the photos again. "They'll be expecting trouble from law enforcement, maybe rival gangs, but they won't be looking for a SEAL team." "Former SEAL," Maria corrected. "Not exactly," Grease smiled. "Half my crew are former Spec Ops, Rangers, Marine Recon, even a couple Delta boys. We've kept it quiet, maintained our cover as just another MC, but we've got the training." Reb raised an eyebrow. "A motorcycle club full of Spec Ops veterans? Someone's got to watch out for the little guy," Grease replied. "We've been tracking Torres for months, gathering intel, but we needed someone with your specific experience to put it all together." The back door opened, and Carlos stepped out, still in his grease-stained coveralls. "We got movement. 3 Desert Vipers trucks just left their compound headed for the warehouse district. They're moving things around," Reb said, "consolidating their valuable assets where they can protect them better." She turned to Maria. "Chief, I know you're trying to protect your people, but we're going to need some official cover for this." Maria sighed heavily. "What did you have in mind?" "I need your trusted deputies to do some selective enforcement, traffic stops, license checks, anything to slow down their movements and gather intel." "They'll complain to Rodriguez," Maria warned. "Let them. It'll make them sloppy, paranoid." She turned to Grease. "I need your people to start pressure testing their security. Nothing obvious, just enough to keep them looking in the wrong direction." Grease grinned. "Already started. My boys ran a few bikes past their checkpoints earlier, got them all spun up about potential rivals moving in. Good. They'll be expecting gang warfare. They won't be looking for a surgical strike." Reb pulled out her phone, showing them Kate's satellite imagery. "We've got 3 days to map their security, identify vulnerabilities, and set up for the main event." "And what exactly is the main event?" Carlos asked. "We're going to let Torres set up his operation exactly as planned. Let him bring in his international contacts, his whole network. And then," Reb smiled coldly, "we're going to take it all down at once. But we'll need one more piece of the puzzle." "What's that?" Maria asked. "Evidence enough to bypass Rodriguez and go straight to the feds. The kind of evidence that makes even corrupt politicians run for cover." Smoke, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, spoke up. "I might be able to help with that." Everyone turned to look at him. "The BBQ joint's been here for 30 years. Everybody comes through here eventually, even people who think they're too important to be seen in a place like this. And everybody talks." Reb looked at the pitmaster with newfound respect. "You've been keeping track? Names, dates, conversations? I may be just a BBQ man, but I'm not stupid. I knew someday someone would need to know what really goes on in this town." Grease let out a low whistle. "Sir, you might just be the most dangerous person here." "Meet back here tomorrow night," Reb instructed. "Grease, bring your best people. Chief, we'll need everything Smoke's collected plus whatever your deputies can legally gather. We've got one shot at this." As the group dispersed, Smoke touched Reb's arm. "You're not just doing this for the town, are you? This is personal." Reb thought of her fallen teammates, of the mission that had gone wrong. Sometimes personal motivation just means you'll work harder to get it right. Back in her ranch house, Reb spread out the intelligence gathered so far, starting to form a plan. Torres had no idea he was walking into a trap 3 days in the making. He thought he was expanding his empire, but he was really stepping into a sniper's crosshairs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Satellite shows massive movement. Whatever they're planning, it's unprecedented. Watch yourself." Reb sent back a simple reply. "Don't worry. This time we're ready for them." The pieces were in motion now. It was just a matter of making sure everyone played their part perfectly, because in 3 days, the Desert Vipers would learn why you never mess with a SEAL's chosen home. The next morning brought tense activity across town. Maria's trusted deputies conducted strategic traffic stops on Desert Vipers vehicles, while Desert Dogs members made their presence known through carefully orchestrated drive-bys of gang territory. From her spot at Smoke's BBQ, Reb watched Razor and 2 of his lieutenants arguing intensely across the street. Their frustration was visible even from a distance. "Your brisket's getting cold," Smoke said, sliding into the booth across from her. He placed a worn leather notebook on the table. "Here's everything I've got on Rodriguez and his cronies. 10 years of notes, conversations, meetings that weren't supposed to happen." Reb flipped through the pages, her expression hardening. "Smoke, this is more than just trafficking. They've been laundering money through half the businesses in town. Why do you think I started keeping track? When my Sarah passed, God rest her soul, and they started pressuring me to sell the BBQ joint, I knew I needed insurance." A commotion outside drew their attention. Razor was shoving one of his own men against a wall, clearly enraged. The pressure was getting to them. Her phone buzzed, a message from Grease. "Package secured. Meet at the old stockyards." "I need to go," Reb told Smoke. "Stay alert. Things are going to get tense before they get better." The abandoned stockyard sat on the outskirts of town, its rusted equipment serving as silent sentinels. Reb found Grease and his core team waiting inside, along with an unexpected guest, a bound and gagged Desert Vipers prospect. "Found him snooping around our territory," Grease explained. "Figured he might have something interesting to share." Reb approached the terrified prospect. She recognized him, one of the newer recruits, barely old enough to drink. "What's your name, kid?" "J. Jimmy," he stammered after Grease removed the gag. "All right, Jimmy. Let's talk about the shipment coming in with Torres." Jimmy's eyes widened. "I don't know anything about—" "Save it," Reb cut him off. "You're wearing a prospect cut, which means you do the grunt work. Loading, unloading, keeping watch. You know things. The question is, are you willing to share those things, or do we have to get creative?" The young man swallowed hard. "They'll kill me." "Kid," Grease growled, "what do you think they'll do when they find out you got caught on our turf?" Jimmy broke. The words poured out. Shipping schedules, guard rotations, the layout of the compound. But it was his last piece of information that made Reb's blood run cold. "They've got some kind of master database," he said. "Names, locations. Torres is bringing it personally. Razor said it's worth more than all their other operations combined." Reb and Grease exchanged looks. A database like that could expose entire trafficking networks or reveal every corrupt official on Torres's payroll. "One more thing," Jimmy added, his voice shaking. "They know someone's working against them. Razor's called in extra muscle, professional guys, not just bikers." Reb's phone buzzed again. "Maria. Problem. Rodriguez just suspended me. Named Razor's cousin as interim deputy chief." "Put him somewhere safe," Reb told Grease, nodding toward Jimmy. "He might be useful later." Back at the BBQ joint, Reb found Maria waiting with Carlos and Smoke. The former deputy chief looked defeated. "They're moving faster than we expected," Maria said. "Rodriguez called it a routine administrative review, but we all know what this means. They're consolidating power before Torres arrives," Carlos added. "My badge probably won't be worth much by morning." Reb considered their options. The original plan needed adjustment. With Maria out and legitimate law enforcement compromised, they'd lost their official cover. Her phone buzzed yet again. "Kate. Satellite shows major movement, multiple vehicles converging on your location. Professional operators, not gang members. Watch yourself." As if on cue, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled slowly past the restaurant. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore," Carlos muttered. "They don't need to be," Reb replied. They think they've got control of the town. That makes them confident. Confidence makes them sloppy. Smoke watched the SUVs disappear around the corner. What do we do now? We change the plan, Reb said firmly. They're expecting resistance from law enforcement or rival gangs, so we give them exactly what they're watching for while we hit them from a direction they'll never see coming. The desert dogs? Smoke asked. Part of it. But we've got another card to play. Reb pulled out her phone, dialing Kate. Remember that favor you owe me? I need satellite coverage, real time, and I need you to make some calls. It's time to wake up some old ghosts. As night fell over the small Texas town, more black SUVs arrived. Professional mercenaries mixed with Desert Vipers members, setting up checkpoints and patrol routes. They were preparing for war, but they were preparing for the wrong kind of fight. In the basement of Smoke's BBQ, Reb laid out the revised plan to her core team. The Desert Dogs would play their part, making noise and drawing attention. Carlos and Maria would work their remaining law enforcement contacts. Smoke's evidence would be their insurance policy. But the real operation would come from the shadows, executed by people who specialized in the impossible. Tomorrow, Reb told them, Torres arrives with his precious database and his international contacts. He's expecting to find a town under his complete control. Instead, he's going to find out what happens when you underestimate the wrong people. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. A storm was coming to this small Texas town. By the time it was over, nothing would be the same. Her phone buzzed. Kate again. Thunder team in position. 6 operators, all former teams. They'll follow your lead. A smile tugged at Reb's lips. Kate had come through, calling in operators she'd worked with before. Men who owed her their lives and who would work in the shadows without needing recognition or official sanction. Commander, Grease's voice came through her encrypted radio. We've got movement at the airstrip. 3 private jets just landed. Looks like Torres is arriving early. Reb grabbed her gear bag, weapons and equipment carefully chosen for the operation ahead. Copy that. Maintain distance. Let them think they've got control of the board. Downstairs, Smoke was serving coffee to a mix of locals and Desert Vipers members. The tension in the restaurant was thick enough to cut with a knife. Reb caught Smoke's eye, giving him a subtle nod. The pitmaster casually walked to the door, flipping the sign to "Closed," before disappearing into his office. Carlos slipped in through the back door, still wearing his mechanic's uniform despite having been fired that morning. Rodriguez just called an emergency town meeting for noon. Mandatory attendance for all business owners. They're going to make their play. Complete takeover, Reb said, using legitimate businesses as fronts for their operation. There's more, Maria added, her voice low. My contacts at state police say they've been ordered to avoid our jurisdiction entirely. No response, no matter what gets reported. Reb checked her watch. 4 hours until the town meeting. 4 hours to set their pieces in place. Her radio crackled. Commander, this is Thunder 1. We've got eyes on Torres. He's traveling with serious protection. Former special forces, maybe CIA. These aren't street thugs. Numbers at least 12 operators plus Desert Vipers muscle. They're heading for the main compound now. Reb pulled up the satellite feed Kate had provided on her laptop. Multiple vehicles were converging on the Desert Vipers headquarters, a supposedly abandoned meat-packing plant on the edge of town. Grease, what's your count on total hostiles? 20 Desert Vipers members plus Razor's new muscle. Add Torres's security detail. We're looking at 40 minimum. All armed, all professional. Good odds, Reb replied, earning a chuckle from the biker leader. Carlos looked concerned. That's not good odds. That's suicide. Numbers don't win fights, Reb said, checking her weapons one last time. Position, timing, and initiative do. Besides, we're not looking to win a straight fight. A black SUV pulled up outside the BBQ joint. 2 men in expensive suits stepped out, heading for the door. Right on schedule, Reb muttered. Carlos, get to Maria. Make sure she's ready. Grease, Have your people start their run in 30 minutes. Thunder Team, maintain shadow surveillance only. The suits entered, scanning the nearly empty restaurant before approaching Smoke's office. Reb could hear their conversation through the thin walls. Mr. Thompson, Commissioner Rodriguez sent us to escort you to the town meeting early. He'd like to discuss some proposed changes to local business regulations. Smoke's voice was firm. The meeting's not for hours. I'm busy with prep work. This isn't a request, sir. Reb tensed, ready to move, but Smoke handled it perfectly. Let me get my apron off. As Smoke emerged from his office, he gave Reb the slightest nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The next few hours would determine everything. Torres and his operation were consolidating their power, preparing to turn this small town into the hub of their criminal empire. They had the numbers, the weapons, and the tactical advantage. What they didn't have was the one thing that mattered most: the understanding of who they were, really fighting. Reb's phone buzzed one final time. Kate. Satellite shows another convoy approaching from the south. Heavy vehicles, probably carrying their tech equipment. Whatever they're planning, it's happening today. Copy that, Reb replied. Time to show them why you don't mess with a SEAL's home. She reached for her radio. All units, Operation Sandstorm is a go. I say again, Sandstorm is green lit. Execute according to plan. Across town, hidden figures began moving into position. The desert dogs mounted up, their engines echoing off the buildings, and in the shadows, 6 highly trained operators readied their weapons. The storm was about to break, and when it did, the desert vipers would learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. The town hall's parking lot filled quickly as locals arrived for Rodriguez's mandatory meeting. Black SUVs flanked the entrance, while armed men in tactical gear conducted pat-downs on everyone entering. Inside, Gabriel Torres sat quietly behind the commissioner's podium, watching the townspeople file in. All units report, Reb whispered into her radio as she observed from a nearby rooftop. Thunder 1 in position. We have eyes on the tech convoy. 6 trucks, heavily armed escort. Grease here. My boys are ready to make some noise. Carlos checking in. Maria's got our insurance package, ready to move. Reb watched through her scope as Razor strutted around the town hall, playing the role of enforcer. The metal briefcase handcuffed to his wrist likely contained the database Jimmy had mentioned. Names and details that could bring down trafficking networks across multiple continents. Execute Phase 1, Reb ordered. The response was immediate. The roar of dozens of motorcycles filled the air as the desert dogs began their coordinated runs, buzzing Desert Viper's checkpoints and drawing security resources away from key positions. Inside the town hall, Rodriguez called the meeting to order. Friends, neighbors, we're here today to discuss some exciting changes coming to our community. Before he could continue, the building's power cut out. Emergency lights kicked in as confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Thunder 2. Status on the power station. Primary and backup power disabled. They're running on emergency generators only. Torres leaned forward, whispering something to Razor. The gang leader immediately began directing his men to secure the perimeter. Thunder Team Phase 2. Hit the convoy. Miles away, the tech shipment erupted in chaos. Precisely placed charges disabled the lead and rear vehicles, trapping the others. The professional security detail found themselves under attack from invisible opponents, highly trained operators moving through the brush like wraiths. Convoy is neutralized, Thunder 1 reported. Minimal casualties, all hostiles contained. Torres received the news through his earpiece, his calm facade cracking slightly. He gestured to his personal security detail, clearly preparing to evacuate. Not yet, Reb whispered. Let them feel the pressure build. Rodriguez was desperately trying to maintain control of the meeting. Please, everyone remain calm. This is just a temporary... The sound of explosions cut him off. The desert dogs had begun their assault on Desert Viper's tech centers around town, using intelligence from Jimmy to hit exactly the right locations. Grease status? 3 server farms burning. They're scrambling to respond just like you said they would. Torres stood abruptly, his security team moving to surround him. The briefcase remained firmly attached to his wrist. All units prepare for Phase 3. Thunder Team, get ready to... Reb's orders were interrupted by an unexpected sight. Smoke Thompson had stood up in the middle of the town hall meeting. "I have something to say," the pitmaster announced firmly. Razor moved toward him. "Sit down, old man. This isn't your time to talk." "No," Smoke replied, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "I think it's exactly my time." He pulled out his worn notebook. "I've got records here. Every meeting, every deal, every bribe, dates, times, amounts. Commissioner Rodriguez, would you like me to start reading?" The commissioner's face went pale. Torres's expression darkened as he assessed this new threat. "Thunder Team, hold position," Reb ordered. "This wasn't part of the plan, but let's see where it goes. You think your little notebook scares us?" Razor sneered, reaching for Smoke. That's when Maria and Carlos made their move. Both former law enforcement officers stood, along with several other townspeople. The dynamic in the room shifted as people began rising from their seats, forming a barrier between Smoke and the Desert Vipers. "Well, well," Torres spoke for the first time, his voice cold and calculating. "It seems we have some local resistance to deal with. Razor, make an example." Razor grinned, drawing his weapon, but before he could act, Reb gave the order she'd been waiting to deliver. "Thunder Team, execute Phase 3. Grease, push them east. All units, converge on the town hall." The chaos that erupted was precisely orchestrated. The Thunder Team emerged from hiding, their coordinated attack hurting Torres's security detail exactly where Reb wanted them. The Desert Dogs pressed in from the west, while hidden operators controlled the escape routes. From her perch, Reb watched the pieces fall into place. Torres and his men had the numbers and firepower, but they were reacting to a plan they couldn't see, fighting shadows and ghosts while the real threat closed in around them. "Remember," she transmitted to all units, "we need Torres alive and that briefcase secured. Everything else is secondary." The final phase was about to begin, and as thunder rolled across the Texas plains, Reb shouldered her rifle and prepared to enter the fray personally. Because sometimes the only way to end a fight is to walk straight into the heart of it. Through her earpiece, Kate's voice crackled with urgency. "Reb, got movement on the interstate. 3 more SUVs heading your way. Looks like Torres called in his reserve team." "Let them come," Reb replied. "They'll just add to the confusion." Below, more townspeople were standing up, joining the human barrier protecting Smoke. The years of intimidation, of looking the other way, were finally ending. Even Torres's cold expression couldn't hide his surprise at the scale of the resistance. "Sir," one of his security team whispered urgently, "we're losing control of the perimeter. These aren't just locals we're dealing with. These are professionals." Torres's hand tightened on the briefcase. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Burn it all." "Thunder 3 to Commander," the radio crackled. "They're activating something in their server farms. Looks like a remote wipe protocol." "Let them," Reb replied. Kate's team already cloned their entire network, while they were distracted by the Desert Dogs. Everything they're trying to destroy, we already have. Rodriguez tried to slip away in the chaos, but Carlos caught him at the side door. "Going somewhere, Commissioner?" The former deputy's fist connected with Rodriguez's jaw, dropping the corrupt official to the floor. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Rain began hammering against the town hall's windows as lightning split the sky. It was time to end this. "All units execute final phase, Thunder Team on my mark." The next few minutes would determine everything, but as Reb prepared to join the fight directly, she knew one thing for certain. This small Texas town was about to show Torres and his organization exactly why you should never underestimate the heart of a community pushed too far. And more importantly, why you should never ever mess with a Navy SEAL's chosen home. Chaos erupted inside the town hall as Torres's security team formed a protective circle around him. Razor started barking orders, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of more explosions in the distance. "Thunder Team status," Reb commanded, moving swiftly from her perch toward the building. "East and west exits covered. They're boxed in." Through the windows, Reb could see smoke being shielded by townspeople, while Maria and Carlos maintained control of their section of the crowd. The resistance was no longer hidden. The town had found its courage. "You think this changes anything?" Torres's voice cut through the chaos as he addressed the crowd. "I own this town. One phone call and I can have National Guard units here claiming this is a riot. How many of you want to see your neighbors gunned down by military units?" Reb's radio crackled. "Commander Kate here. Just intercepted communications. Torres is making calls trying to get military support by claiming domestic terrorism." "Not happening," Reb replied. "Execute Protocol Delta." Suddenly, every phone in the building lost signal. The look of confusion on Torres's face was priceless as he stared at his useless device. "What's happening?" Razor demanded. "They've got a tactical jammer," one of Torres's security team reported. "Professional grade." Torres's calm facade finally cracked. "Get me out of here. Now." His security team began moving toward the rear exit, using Desert Vipers as a screen. But as they approached the door, smoke grenades crashed through the windows, filling the room with thick white clouds. "All units engage," Reb ordered, pulling on her night vision goggles. The Thunder Team breached from multiple points simultaneously. In the chaos and smoke, Torres's professional security found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't communicate with, and couldn't escape. Reb moved through the smoke like a wraith, her movements precise and lethal. Years of SEAL training took over as she systematically disabled threats, working her way toward Torres. Commissioner Rodriguez tried to run, but found himself face to face with Carlos. "Going somewhere?" the mechanic asked before knocking him unconscious with a single punch. Razor pulled his gun, firing wildly into the smoke. "Come out and fight, you cowards!" Reb's voice came from behind him. "Careful what you wish for." Before Razor could turn, Reb's strike hit him in the back of the knee. As he fell, a second blow knocked his weapon away. The gang leader found himself on his knees, staring up at Reb through the thinning smoke. "You should have left Smoke alone," she said, before rendering him unconscious. Torres was backing away, his security detail falling one by one to the Thunder Team's precise attacks. The briefcase was still handcuffed to his wrist. "Commander," Grease's voice came through the radio. "We've got the perimeter locked down. Desert Vipers are surrendering all over town." "Stay focused," Reb replied. "Torres is our primary target." The arms dealer looked around frantically, realizing he was running out of options. His last two security members stood their ground, buying him time to reach for a small device in his pocket. "Thunder 3. He's got a dead man's switch." Torres smiled coldly. "Stand back, or I release everything. Every name, every operation sent to every major news outlet. How many of your fellow operators would die when their covers are blown?" Reb emerged from the smoke, her weapon trained on him. "You'd be dead before your finger leaves that button." "Maybe," Torres admitted. "But are you willing to sacrifice that many lives?" "I remember Yemen, Commander Mitchell. You couldn't save your team then. Can you really risk more deaths now?" The mention of Yemen made Reb's finger tighten on the trigger, but before either of them could act, a single shot rang out. Torres screamed as the device was shot from his hand with surgical precision. "Nice shot, Thunder 2, Reb said, advancing on Torres. "My pleasure, Commander." Torres clutched his bleeding hand, his composure finally shattered. "You don't understand what you've done. The people I work for are about to have much bigger problems." Reb cut him off, removing the briefcase from his wrist. "Kate, do you have control of the data?" "Affirmative. Thunder Team's tech specialist just finished cloning the drive. We've got everything." As the smoke cleared, the scene came into focus. Desert Vipers members and Torres's security team were zip-tied on the floor. Maria and Carlos were securing Rodriguez and the other corrupt officials. Smoke stood proudly among his fellow townspeople, his notebook of evidence still clutched tightly. "Thunder Team, secure the package for transport. Grease, sweep the town and make sure we didn't miss anything." Reb turned to Maria and Carlos. I believe several federal agencies will be very interested in what's in this briefcase. Torres glared up at her from the floor. This isn't over. Reb smiled coldly. Actually, it is. You just don't know it yet. The sound of helicopters approached as federal authorities, alerted by Kate's team, began arriving. The long nightmare that had gripped the town was finally ending. But as Reb watched Torres being led away in handcuffs, she knew he was right about one thing. There would be consequences. The question was, who would be facing them? Federal agents swarmed the town hall, processing suspects and collecting evidence. Reb stood off to the side, watching as Torres and Razor were loaded into separate vehicles. The Thunder team had already melted away, leaving no trace of their presence. Smoke approached, carrying 2 plates of his famous brisket. Thought you might need this, he said, handing one to Reb. After all, you just helped bring down an international trafficking ring from my little BBQ joint. Your evidence helped make it possible, Reb replied, taking a grateful bite. Those notebooks of yours are going to put a lot of people away. Commander Mitchell? A tall woman in an FBI jacket approached. I'm Special Agent Diana Chen. We need to discuss what happened here. Of course. Reb turned to Smoke. Rain check on that brisket? Smoke smiled knowingly. Honey, after what you did for this town, you've got free BBQ for life. In a makeshift command center set up in Maria's old office, Reb sat across from Chen and 2 other federal agents. Her phone buzzed with a message from Kate. Data secured. International teams moving on identified targets. Well done. So, Chen began, want to explain how a former Navy SEAL, a motorcycle club, and a BBQ pitmaster managed to bring down one of the largest trafficking operations we've been chasing for years? Reb's response was interrupted by Grease entering the room. He'd changed out of his motorcycle club, cut into a suit that somehow made him look even more intimidating. That would be where I come in, he said, pulling out a badge. Special Agent Jackson Parker, FBI Organized Crime Division. Deep cover operation, 3 years in play. Reb hid her surprise well, but inside she was reeling. Grease, or Parker, hadn't just been playing along with her plan. He'd been running his own operation. The Desert Dogs? She asked. Mostly former military who now work as federal contractors, Parker explained. We've been building a case against Torres for years, but could never get close enough. Then you showed up and started causing trouble. Chen smiled, and provided the perfect opportunity to spring the trap. Though I'm curious about the other operators involved. The ones no one seems to have seen. What others? Reb replied innocently. I just saw a lot of brave townspeople standing up for themselves. Parker suppressed a grin. The surveillance equipment mysteriously malfunctioned during certain periods, very unfortunate. Outside, the town was coming back to life. Desert Vipers members were being rounded up across 3 states based on information from Torres's database. Commissioner Rodriguez and his corrupt officials were facing federal charges, and Maria had just been reinstated as deputy chief with full authority to rebuild the department. Reb's phone buzzed again. A message from Thunder 1. Package secured. Data transmitted. Team dissolving. Good hunting, Commander. One thing still bothers me, Chen said, reviewing her notes. Torres mentioned Yemen. Want to tell me about that? Classified, Reb and Parker said simultaneously. Chen looked between them, then sighed. You know what? I don't want to know. The brass upstairs is happy we've got enough evidence to put Torres away forever, and somehow nobody got killed. I'm calling it a win. As the federal agents wrapped up their initial investigation, Reb walked back to Smoke's BBQ. The place was packed with townspeople celebrating their newfound freedom. Maria and Carlos sat at the counter while Smoke served his famous brisket. Parker fell into step beside her. You know, we make a pretty good team. Would have been nice to know you were FBI, Reb replied. Would have compromised a 3-year operation. Besides, he grinned, you didn't exactly advertise your backup team either. What team? They walked in silence for a moment. You know, the Bureau is always looking for consultants with your skill set. Thanks, but I'm done with that life. This town is my home now. Is it? Because I heard about 3 other trafficking networks operating in South Texas. Seems like the kind of thing a small town might need protection from. Reb stopped, studying Parker's face. Are you offering me a job or asking for help? Maybe both. The Desert Dogs could use someone with your expertise. Officially, we're just another MC. Unofficially, he shrugged. Well, someone's got to watch out for the little guy. Before Reb could respond, her phone buzzed one final time. Kate. New intel suggests Torres's associates are regrouping. Might be headed your way for revenge. Reb smiled. Maybe retirement would have to wait a little longer. Let me think about it, she told Parker. The next few days brought dramatic changes to the small Texas town. Federal agents continued processing evidence while news vans clogged the streets, all hoping to get the story of how a small community had brought down an international trafficking ring. Reb sat in Smoke's BBQ, watching CNN run a story about Torres's arrest. The news anchor was carefully avoiding any mention of Thunder Team or tactical operations, instead focusing on the brave local resistance led by a former Navy SEAL. They're calling you a hero, Smoke said, refreshing Reb's coffee, though they don't know the half of it. They don't need to, Reb replied. Better if some things stay in the shadows. Her phone lit up with a text from Maria. Meeting at Carlos's garage. Important. 20 minutes later, Reb found herself in the back office of Rivera's auto shop with Maria, Parker, and surprisingly, Agent Chen. We've got a problem, Chen began without preamble. Torres talked. Parker leaned forward. What did he give them? Names, contacts, but more importantly, he revealed the existence of something called Project Omega. Apparently, it's a black book of every trafficking deal, every corrupt official, every hidden operation for the past decade. Reb's expression remained neutral, but her mind was racing. She'd heard whispers about Omega during her active duty days. The briefcase didn't contain the complete database, Chen continued, spreading photos across the workbench. It was just a small part. The real database is stored somewhere else, and Torres claims his associates are moving it. Moving it where? Maria asked. Here. Chen spread out satellite imagery showing convoys heading toward their region. These aren't just gang members, we're talking former special forces, intelligence operatives, mercenaries. They think we still have Torres's data, Parker concluded. Or they want revenge, Reb added. Either way, they're coming. Carlos, who had been quietly working on a car outside, walked in wiping his hands. How many? At least 60 operators split into 3 teams, Chen replied. They're professionals, well-equipped, and they don't care about collateral damage. Maria looked worried. The town's still recovering, we're not ready for another fight. No, Reb agreed. But we don't have a choice. If these people come here looking for Omega, they'll tear the town apart. Parker studied the satellite photos. My team stretched thin running operations against Torres's other holdings. We can maybe get 10 operators here in time. The Thunder Team? Chen asked, surprising everyone. At their looks, she smiled. Please. I'm FBI, not blind. I know someone helped you take down Torres, even if it's not in any official report. Reb shook her head. They're gone, dissolved back into the shadows. That's how they operate. Then we work with what we have, Carlos said firmly. This is our town. We'll defend it. Reb's phone buzzed. Kate. Got your satellite request. 3 convoys, heavily armed, ETA 48 hours. Want me to make some calls? She typed back. Not yet. Let me try something first. I have an idea, Reb told the group, but you're not going to like it. Try us, Maria said. We let them come, all of them, but we control how they come, where they go, and what they find when they get here. Parker caught on first. You want to set a trap. The whole town becomes the trap, Reb explained. We use their assumptions against them. They're expecting to find Torres's data, so we give them something to find. Meanwhile, we pick them apart. Using their own tactics against them, Parker finished. Chen looked skeptical. That's insane. These are professional killers we're talking about. So am I, Reb replied quietly. And this time, I've got home field advantage. She stood, moving to the garage window. In the distance, storm clouds were gathering over the Texas plains. Somewhere out there, 3 teams of killers were heading their way, thinking they were going to find a small town unprepared for their arrival. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Maria, I need you to coordinate with the townspeople. Anyone who wants to leave should go now. Anyone who stays needs to be ready. Carlos, start mapping out defensive positions. Every alley, every rooftop, every basement. I want to know this town better than they ever could. She turned to Parker. I need the desert dogs, all of them. Agent Chen, how much backup can you officially provide? The FBI agent smiled grimly. Officially none. Unofficially, I can delay any response to reports of disturbances in this area for about 24 hours. That's all we'll need. Reb turned back to the group. They're coming to our home thinking we'll be easy targets. Let's show them exactly how wrong they are. Thunder rolled across the plains as the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm was coming, in more ways than one, but this time they would be ready. One more thing. Smoke's voice came from the garage doorway. Everyone turned to see the pitmaster standing there, his expression determined. My BBQ joint's got that big basement storage area. Used to be a Cold War bomb shelter. Could be useful. Reb nodded. Perfect for a command center. Those thick walls will help with radio interference too. I've also got something else, Smoke continued. Remember those notebooks? Well, they're not just about Rodriguez and Torres. Over the years, I've collected intel on their entire operation. Safe houses, escape routes, emergency protocols, everything. How? Chen asked, clearly impressed. Like I said before, everybody talks at a BBQ joint, especially when they think the old pitmaster isn't paying attention. You'd be amazed what people let slip between bites of brisket. Parker whistled low. That kind of intel could help us predict their moves. Exactly, Reb said. They'll be using Torres's old playbook. Thanks to Smoke, we already know it by heart. Her phone buzzed again. Kate. First convoy passing through Oklahoma. They're moving faster than expected. Second and third groups converging from Louisiana and New Mexico. They're coordinating their approach. They're learning from Torres's mistakes, Reb observed. No more operating independently. This time they're working together. That could work in our favor, Parker added. More coordination means more radio traffic, more chances to intercept their communications. And more chances for us to feed them false information, Maria said, catching on to the plan. Carlos had been sketching on a greasy workbench pad. I've got some ideas for the town's defense. Growing up here, we used to play in all these old buildings. There are passages and connections they won't know about. Start marking them, Reb ordered. Every route, every hidden spot. We'll turn this town into one big tactical maze. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming on the garage's metal roof. In less than 48 hours, their small Texas town would become a battlefield. But this time, they weren't just defending themselves. They were laying a trap for some of the most dangerous operators in the world. And as Reb looked around at her unlikely team, a BBQ pitmaster, a deputy chief, a mechanic, an FBI agent, and a deep cover operative, she knew they had something their enemies didn't, a reason to fight that went beyond money or power. They had a home worth protecting, and they were about to show these professional killers exactly what that meant. The next 24 hours transformed the small Texas town into a carefully orchestrated trap. Reb stood on the roof of Smoke's BBQ, watching townspeople execute her plans with military precision. The restaurant's basement had become their command center, its old bomb shelter walls now lined with communication equipment and tactical maps. East Team reports they're in position. Maria's voice came through the radio. All civilian evacuations complete from that sector. Reb watched through her binoculars as Parker's desert dogs took up concealed positions throughout the town. They didn't look like federal operators anymore. They'd fully embraced their MC cover, looking every bit the rough bikers they pretended to be. Kate, what's our status on the incoming teams? First convoy 20 miles out, moving cautiously. Second and third about an hour behind. They're coordinating their approach, planning to hit from 3 directions simultaneously. Reb smiled, exactly as expected. Her phone buzzed with an unexpected message from Thunder 1. Team still dissolved, but 6 operators happened to be in the area. Strictly unofficial. Want some help? Thought you boys would never ask, she replied. Commander, Carlos's voice crackled over the radio. You need to see this. In the garage's makeshift surveillance center, Carlos had the drone feeds displayed on multiple screens. The approaching convoys were professional, moving in tactical formations, but something was off. Look at their loadout, Carlos pointed. They're carrying specialized breaching equipment, electronic warfare gear, thermal imaging systems. They're not just coming for revenge, Reb realized. They think Omega is here, hidden somewhere in town. Is it? Maria asked carefully. Reb's expression gave nothing away. Would it matter if it was? Guess not. Carlos studied the screens. They're going to tear this place apart looking for it. No, Reb replied firmly. They're not. Her radio crackled. Thunder 1 team in position, permission to engage advanced scouts? Reb checked the time. The storm clouds were getting darker, the wind picking up. Perfect conditions for what she had planned. Negative, Thunder 1. Let them get comfortable first. Make them think they have the initiative. The first signs of the enemy advance teams appeared at the edge of town. Pairs of operators moving tactically, checking buildings and alleyways. They were good, but they were looking for obvious threats, not the kind Reb had prepared. All units maintain radio silence unless emergency. Execute Phase 1. Across town, lights began going out in systematic patterns. Power to certain blocks cut, while others remained lit, creating a complicated patchwork of light and shadow. The approaching operators would assume battle damage or hasty defensive preparations. They wouldn't realize every shadow was deliberate. Every dark alley, a potential trap. Maria, status on our package? Ready to go. They'll find exactly what they're looking for, exactly when we want them to. Reb had prepared a fake Omega database, filled with just enough real information to be convincing. When the enemy found it, they'd think they'd accomplished their mission. That's when the real trap would spring. Her phone buzzed again. Kate. Main convoy accelerating. They're taking the bait. Smoke appeared on the roof carrying coffee and his signature brisket sandwiches. Thought you could use these. Big night ahead. You should be in the shelter with the others. The old pitmaster snorted. This is my town too. Besides, someone needs to keep you fed. Commander, Thunder 2 reported. We've got movement. Lots of it. They're not waiting for full dark. Through her binoculars, Reb could see the first major wave approaching. Vehicles moving into position, operators deploying in textbook formations. They thought they were setting up for a systematic sweep of a small, underprepared town. Reb stood, checking her weapons one last time. Remember, we're not just defending, we're hunting. These people came to our home thinking we'd be easy prey. Let's show them what happens when predators become prey. The storm finally broke. Rain beginning to fall as lightning illuminated the approaching forces. In the distance, thunder rolled across the Texas plains like artillery fire. The battle for the soul of this small town was about to begin, and Reb intended to make sure it would be a night these operators would never forget, if they survived it. Around her, the trap was set. Thunder Team waited in the shadows, Desert Dogs members were in position, and townspeople manned their defensive posts. They had turned their home into a weapon, and soon, their enemies would learn that sometimes the most dangerous battlefield is the one where every citizen is a potential threat, and every building holds a surprise. All units, Reb commanded, her voice calm and steady. Commence Operation Omega. Let's show them why you never underestimate a small Texas town. The rain intensified as she moved to her initial position. In the darkness below, professional killers were about to learn a brutal lesson about the difference between having tactical superiority and truly understanding the ground you're fighting on. And more importantly, they were about to learn why you never, ever bring a fight to a Navy SEAL's doorstep. The rain intensified as enemy operators moved through the darkened streets. Their night vision equipment gave them confidence, but Reb knew it would also be their weakness. They were looking through a digital green haze while her people knew every shadow by heart. Thunder 1 status, Reb whispered into her radio. First team moving into the kill zone. 20 operators moving in 4-man cells. Heavy weapons, demo gear. Parker, Desert Dogs in position, ready to create chaos on your mark. Reb watched through her scope as the enemy's lead element approached Smoke's BBQ. They moved well, covering angles, checking corners, professional, dangerous, but predictable. Their tactical formation was textbook special forces, suggesting many were former military, likely disillusioned operators drawn to private sector money. Execute Phase 2, she ordered. Across town, the Desert Dogs roared to life, their motorcycles thundering through the streets in what appeared to be a panicked evacuation. The enemy operators reacted exactly as trained, splitting their forces to investigate the new threat. Their predictability would be their downfall. They're dividing, Thunder 2 reported. Lead teams taking the bait, moving north along Martinez Street. Second convoy breaking formation, Carlos added from his surveillance position. 3 vehicles pursuing the bikers, 2 maintaining position. They're getting sloppy with their spacing. Maria, now. From her position at the garage, Maria triggered the prepared devices. Strategic transformers blew, plunging new sections of town into darkness while illuminating others. The enemy's night vision equipment suddenly became a liability as they dealt with rapidly changing light conditions. The sudden shifts between darkness and artificial light would play havoc with their adapted vision. Multiple targets disoriented, Thunder 3 confirmed. Moving to engage. They're bumping into each other, breaking formation. It's like they've never dealt with counter-NVG tactics. The first shots were silent, suppressed weapons taking out key targets in the enemy's command structure. By the time they realized they were under attack, the Thunder team had already melted away to new positions. The confusion in the enemy ranks was evident in their radio chatter, which Kate was intercepting and relaying. Commander, Kate's voice came through her earpiece. Third convoy is holding back. Their commander's smart. He's realized something's wrong. He's trying to establish a tactical overview of the situation. Good, Reb replied. That's what the package is for. He'll think he's the only one who sees through our trap. On cue, Maria transmitted a burst of encrypted data, the fake Omega database, from a location near the center of town. As predicted, the enemy electronic warfare team picked up the transmission. Their eagerness to intercept it would be their undoing. They're moving, Thunder 1 reported, all units converging on the transmission source, lead elements breaking protocol in their haste to secure the data. Reb smiled grimly. Phase 3, all units execute at will. Remember, controlled chaos is our friend. The storm above provided perfect cover as the real battle began. Lightning flashes created strobe effects that further disoriented the enemy, while thunder masked the sound of movement. The Desert Dogs abandoned their decoy run, instead launching coordinated attacks on the enemy's vehicles. Thunder team operators picked off anyone who tried to call for backup or establish a command position. But it was the town's people who proved most effective. Every door that looked like an escape route led to a prepared ambush. Every shadow concealed a defender who knew exactly where to shoot. Carlos's mechanics had rigged car alarms to create diversions. Smoke's kitchen staff used their knowledge of back alleys to outflank the intruders. The enemy operators found themselves fighting phantoms, never able to establish control or consolidate their forces. Commander, Parker's voice was tight with controlled excitement. They're falling back to preset rally points. The warehouse district, just like you predicted. No, Reb ordered. They're falling back to where we want them. The rally points are an illusion. Let them think they chose their fallback position. The fake Omega data had led them straight into the town's old industrial district, a maze of buildings rigged with motion sensors and prepared firing positions. As the enemy operators sought cover, they found themselves being herded into increasingly smaller spaces. Each attempt to find a defensive position pushed them exactly where Reb wanted them. Thunder Team status. 15 targets eliminated, 20+ wounded. Rest are contained in the warehouse sector. They're starting to realize it's a trap, but they've got nowhere else to go. Reb switched channels. Kate, what's the third convoy doing? Finally moving in. Their commander must have realized his advance teams are being decimated. He's bringing in his reserve force. Looks like his elite operators. Perfect. Maria, initiate final sequence. Let's show them what a small town can really do. The remaining streetlights shut down completely, plunging the town into total darkness. The storm above intensified, rain hammering down as lightning split the sky. Through her thermal scope, Reb watched the enemy's remaining forces cluster together in the warehouses. Their training told them to consolidate, to establish a defensive position. Instead, they were doing exactly what she'd planned, gathering in one location. All units be advised, Phase 4 is active. I say again, Phase 4 is weapons-free. Execute with precision. Lightning illuminated her face as she prepared for the final confrontation. It was time to remind these professionals why Navy SEALs were considered the most dangerous operators in the world. Federal agents swarmed the town center, processing captured hostiles and collecting evidence. Reb stood off to the side, watching as Agent Chen coordinated with other agencies. The Thunder Team had already disappeared, leaving no trace of their presence, just as professional operators should. Maria approached, carrying 2 plates of smoked brisket. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, handing one to Reb. "After all, you just helped protect an entire town using nothing but local folks and a few old friends." "The town protected itself," Reb replied, taking a grateful bite. "I just helped organize what was already here." "Commander Mitchell." Parker approached, back in his FBI suit. Final count: 43 hostiles captured, 12 killed in action, remainder scattered. No civilian casualties. Found some interesting things in their possession too. "Like what?" Reb asked, though she already suspected. "Complete operations manual for something called Project Omega. The real one, not our decoy. Seems they brought their playbook right to us, thinking they'd need it to verify the data they thought we had." "Ironic," Maria commented. "They brought us exactly what we needed to take down their entire network." "Agent Chen." Reb nodded toward the FBI agent who was walking their way. "The Bureau's very interested in your techniques," Chen said without preamble. "Turning an entire town into a tactical operation? That's new. Effective, but new." "Nothing new about it," Reb replied. "Just applied some old principles. Know your terrain, use your resources. Let the enemy's assumptions work against them." Her phone buzzed. A message from Kate. "Omega manual already yielding results, international teams moving on identified targets, networks falling apart worldwide." Chen's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to the group. That was headquarters. "They're getting calls from agencies worldwide. Trafficking networks are scrambling, trying to go dark. But with the manual's protocols, we know exactly how they operate." "The town's going to be different now," Maria observed, watching as locals helped federal agents process the scene. People found their courage. "They always had it," Reb said. "They just needed to remember." Parker adjusted his tie. "You know, the offer still stands. The Bureau could use someone with your skills. Officially this time. Thanks, but I've got other plans." Reb watched as smoke-directed volunteers organizing meals for the federal agents. "This town's home now." "Is it?" Chen asked. "Because we're already getting reports of similar operations in other small towns. Seems like your success here has inspired some copycats." "Then maybe those towns need to learn what this one did," Reb replied. "Sometimes the best defense isn't fancy equipment or tactical teams, it's community. Her phone buzzed again. Thunder 1. Area secure. Team dissolving. It's been an honor, Commander. Keep that porch light on. Never know when old friends might pass through. Carlos approached, wiping grease from his hands. Town Council's meeting tomorrow. Emergency session to elect new leadership. Let me guess. Reb smiled. Maria's name came up? Among others. Carlos looked meaningfully at Smoke, who seemed surprised. Me? I'm just a BBQ man who helped expose some bad people. You're the one who kept records for years, Maria pointed out. People notice things like that. They trust someone who was willing to stand up before it was safe to do so. Reb's radio crackled. Parker's voice. Commander, got some interesting intel. Seems our friends had similar operations running in other states. Might need someone to look into those. Before Reb could respond, Kate sent another message. Satellite shows movement near Houston. Similar patterns to what we saw here. Could be nothing. Don't tell me you're thinking of leaving already, Smoke said, noticing her thoughtful expression. No, Reb said firmly. This is home now, but home might occasionally need protecting from a larger radius. Maria grinned. You know, as deputy chief, I might need a special advisor. Someone with tactical experience, extra legal knowledge. Are you offering me a job? More like a consulting position. Very unofficial. Plenty of time to help Smoke with the BBQ joint. Reb looked around at her town. The place she'd come to hide had become something more. A home worth fighting for, worth protecting, and maybe, just maybe, a model for other communities facing similar threats. Thunder 1 to Commander, her radio suddenly crackled. If you're taking that consulting job, might know some operators looking for occasional contract work. Strictly legitimate, of course. Of course, Reb replied, smiling. Smoke refilled their coffee cups. Well, looks like the BBQ joint might need to expand its back room, make space for more private meetings. Planning for the future already? Honey, Smoke said firmly. After what this town just lived through, we're all planning for the future. A better one. The morning sun climbed higher, highlighting the damage that would need repair, but also illuminating the strength of a community that had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. Reb's phone buzzed one final time. Kate. Reports confirmed. More operations identified. Justice served. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.